Our next speaker is research professor in the Lynch School of Education. He has consulted for OECD, the World Bank, governments, universities and teachers union all over the world. Give your best welcome to Andy Hargreaves.
Wow. Wow. I've no idea what she said, but I'd like to know what it is, because I'd like applause like that again, basically. Hands up if you're from Sweden. Okay, well, I'm in the right place then, because overnight, I came from a country that has no government at the moment. Of course, you've no idea what this is like, okay? So I came not only from a country that has no government, which is the United States, because they shut the right? They shut the government. Yes. And I've come to be with people from a country where you've just started a government after not having a government for quite some time. So. Although somebody pointed out that when you don't have a government, you still pay people. Whereas in America, they actually stop paying them. So I'm thrilled to be with you today. My task in the 55 minutes that we have together is to talk about collaboration. And this has been a big issue in Sweden over the last few years. It's a big issue because of the teaching profession and the importance of the teaching profession. And it's a big issue also about social justice, because sometimes people think collaboration's a nice thing if you can get it. Like if you have money, it's nice to collaborate. If you have nice students who don't create many problems, it's nice to collaborate. But really, if you're in very tough, difficult, demanding schools with challenging students, there's no time to collaborate. You need to kind of get on with the work. But yet, the evidence is overwhelming that it's always good to collaborate, whatever your students are like. It's essential to collaborate when your students are extremely challenging. Collaboration is about social justice. It's not just about making teachers feel better, but it's about doing better things for your students as well. So that's what I'm going to try and explore with you today. There'll be a couple of moments when you'll get a chance to interact with each other in Swedish or any other language you prefer. When I do that, I will, at the end of the very short interactions, I'll raise my hand like this, and you will do what?
Collaborate.
Excellent. You will raise your hands like this. And if you see someone else's hand raised, you will raise your hands like that, okay? So, excellent. We're at a critical point. The government's just getting going. You have a fabulous minister, I hope you agree, Anna Ekström. Not sure? Yeah, look, she's better than a lot of the alternatives that are around in the world right now. So be very grateful for that. I'm trying, I think, in difficult circumstances to try and do the right thing. So, if I press this, you should see that. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at @HargreavesBC. You can tweet anything I say, unless I say don't tweet this. If I say don't tweet this, if you'll respect it, that's good. There's not many places where I say that, and much of what I say is based on this book, which is being translated into Swedish with student litteratur. Is that how you say it?
Good enough.
Good enough for an English guy. Okay, all right. So and there's material related to this which you can get on my website, which is free. So the point is not to sell the books. The point is to share the ideas with other people in an easy way. In 1975, an American in Chicago, a man called Dan Lorty, did his master's degree looking at lawyers. He was with a group of sociologists who were interested in what do occupations do to people. So when you have a job and you do it a long time, what happens to you as a person? Because the job is structured in particular ways. I'm a professor, and so when my kids were teenagers and we'd be sitting around at dinner and I'd begin talking, they'd say, "Oh, here you go again, Dad, lecture number 47. Because if you profess a lot, it tends to spill over into the rest of your life. If you're a funeral director, you have to be sort of very, like this, very, very supportive, and you can't say, "Here comes another body, let's wheel it right through into the fires of hell. Here we go." So your job does things to you. And Lorty was interested, first of all, in lawyers for his master's degree. And he studied people who started in law and found that the beginning lawyers who were in larger firms with lots of people around them that they worked with were actually more successful than the beginning lawyers who were mainly on their own or with one or two people in smaller firms. And taking this, he then, for his PhD, studying 100 teachers with a long interview schedule, went into 5 towns in the Boston area and was interested in what was the work of teaching like? What was the culture of teaching like? What was it like to be a teacher? And out of his work came a lot of things, but one of them was this, that teaching, he said, the culture was characterized by 3 things, almost everywhere. It was characterized by presentism. Teaching is overwhelming. You have a lot of kids, they're doing different things at the same time. One's misbehaving, another one's throwing up, another one can't read. So all of this happens at the same time. And it's just completely overwhelming. So you have no time to think about the future. You're focused only what you can do here and now to make a difference with your kids. And the second thing he talked about was individualism. Individualism, he said, mainly teachers taught by themselves in their own class. Most of the time they didn't see other teachers. And the schools are built like that, and the assumption of the teacher culture is very much that you do the work on your own. And this led to a third thing, which he called conservatism with a small c. And it meant that because you were on your own and you were overwhelmed, you weren't really very interested in like longer term plans, big school visions. You were only interested in what will make a difference right now, tomorrow, for the kids that you had in front of you. And what Lorty wanted, but said was very difficult to get, was a more collaborative culture that would enable teachers to think together about how to progress through the future. And then along in 1989 came a woman called Susan Rosenholz, another American, and she did a study of 78 schools in Tennessee. And in Tennessee, what she found was some schools, there is collaboration going on, even though in most there isn't. And even though these schools serve similar kinds of kids, in the collaborative ones, she found, and many studies have backed this up since, when teachers work together, because they share ideas, they have access to each other's ideas, because they give each other moral support when things are going badly or are difficult, they get better results from their kids than teachers who work mainly by themselves. So now in 1989, now we basically knew, okay, on average, it's better to collaborate than not to collaborate. But it goes much further than that, and in 1994, I wrote this book called Changing Teachers, Changing Times. It's in Swedish also. Do any of you know it? One person in the room. Could we give him a round of applause, please? One person who, thank you. So the complaint about why teachers didn't collaborate more, the main reason people said was teachers don't have enough support and they don't have enough time. And if teachers had more time, they'd collaborate more. Well, I found, when I immigrated to Canada in the late 1980s from England, I came across a very unusual situation. And that was that the teacher union had bargained with the government to get more preparation time for elementary teachers outside of their class. Teachers all of a sudden had more time, so the question was, a natural experiment, would they collaborate more? What do you think? Hands up who think they did. Hands up who thinks they didn't. Whoa, you're such cynics. Okay, so we picked two districts. We picked one district which had a specific focus on developing collaborative planning amongst the teachers, where they planned curriculum together and they created time and expectations and a structure of support to do that. And then we asked people if they could give us the most uninteresting district there was around. Not a bad one, but not doing anything, just a kind of really ordinary, dull district. And everybody mentioned the same one, the same municipality. So we also looked at that. And what we found was, in the district where there was no focus on collaborative planning, the teachers either just did more individual work. They marked more books, they prepared more kind of nice materials to put on the wall, they called parents, they did not use the time of their own will to work collaboratively with other teachers. Indeed, some of the teachers didn't like having more time because they did not want to let go of their children to somebody else. Nobody loved the children as much as they did. And they didn't want other people coming into their class wrecking their class and their relationship with the children. So even when they had the time, some teachers did not want to let go. You know, sometimes you can kill the thing you love by loving it just a bit too much, right? So, but in the other district, where there was a focus on collaboration, what we found there was sometimes that went well, but sometimes the principals micromanaged it and created what we call contrived collegiality, which means the principals decided when you were going to collaborate, what you would collaborate on, who you would collaborate with, where you would collaborate, and probably what the results of the collaboration would be that you hadn't found out yet. So, collaboration can be too weak. If you just say, here's the time, off you go, you may not get very much. And collaboration can be too forced or restricted or bureaucratic. This is what we found here. So we're still progressing here. And then a few years later, Michael Fullan, that's him, I'm the better looking one on the left. Michael Fullan and I wrote this book called Professional Capital. Do you know this, any of you? Okay, all right. So there's a formula on the front of that book, but I'm going to show you another formula first. And I want you to spend a minute talking to your partner, then I want you to tell me what this is a formula for. Okay, any mathematicians in the room? You're afraid to show it, aren't you, right? Here you go. All right, here's the formula. What is that a formula for? Talk to the person next to you for 1 minute. Okay. So, I'm not going to ask you because it's a big room, okay? But you'll have been talking about it at your table and thinking what it is. So I'll tell you. It is a formula for what in English we call depreciated value of a machine. So this describes how your car loses its value from the moment you purchase it. So V is the value of the car, and the value of it now equals the cost, the original cost, which is C, bracket 1 minus R, which is the rate of depreciation, the rate at which it loses its value year by year, times T, the number of years. So, why am I telling you this? Because there are economists of education worldwide working with governments, as in England or in the United States. Their names are people like Tom Kane, Eric Hanacek, who have formulas for the value of teachers that look very much like this. And they draw on literature which they claim shows that teachers get better over the first 4 years of their career. And after that, it's at least, after that, nothing. It's a plateau. It's a plateau. And this then justifies for them and for the governments and school districts and states that they advise, this then justifies for them, bring teachers in, have good human capital, so get good, enthusiastic people, teach for America, teach for Sweden, bring them in, work them hard for 4 years, give them some mentoring and coaching early on, they'll get better quickly, and then after 4 years, they're not going to get better anymore, so you let them go. Once they get tired, you let them go. Once they have children, you let them go. Once they have aging parents, you let them go. And then you replace them with another group who are cheap, inexpensive, and you work them hard for another 4 years, and then you let those go. And with that, you bring down the cost of teaching, you bring down the cost of public education, you release taxpayers' money to move into the private sector and away from the public sector. Are you with me? This is the business capital model of public education, and Sweden has been one of the world leaders of this, which is to reduce, which is to increase the amount of private money moving in the economy versus public sector taxation by reducing the cost of teaching over time. Are you with me so far? A very influential model. And the 4-year rule, by the way, works in almost no other country than the United States, because the United States does not support its teachers enough beyond the first 2 or 3 years. So you get better over time. We'll see if you follow this model that Michael Fullen and I talk about in our book, Professional Capital. Professional capital means you want to get a return from your teachers, you invest in them. You want to get a return from your leaders, you invest in them. And you invest in them in 3 ways. The human capital, the individuals. Who do you attract? How good are they? How well qualified? How competent are they with young people? Do they have experience of working with young people before, as they do in Finland, for example, before they come in? So you attract people with the right human capital, and this is what many systems focus on, but we need to look at 2 other things. Second is the social capital. How are we when we're together? And there's a lot of studies now from many different countries, not just the United States, that indicate very clearly that social capital adds value to human capital. Whatever your people are like, if they work together, they'll get better. Bad teachers will become competent. Competent teachers will become good. Good teachers will become outstanding because they have support from other teachers and access to their knowledge over time. You will become a better teacher or a worse one simply because of who are your colleagues. And some of you will have experienced that in your life. When you move from one school to another, suddenly you feel you're flying where you weren't before, and sometimes it goes the opposite way. You feel you were great, you go to a school where everybody's on their own, and suddenly you feel you can't teach anymore. It's not you, it's your colleagues. So the third thing, as well as social capital, is decision-making capital. This is about your judgments. And this means that over time, do you get better in your judgments? And this happens by practicing things over and over again, and by being stretched and challenged. Let me give you an example. I'm going to show you my leg. Very exciting. Okay? Down the outside of my leg is a big scar that had 42 staples in it this August, because I'm a hiker and I walk the Appalachian Trail in stretches. It's 2,000 miles long. I've done about a third of it now. And in the summer, I fell on the easiest 100 meters of the hardest 4 days, and broke my ankle in 2 places. And when I fell, my friend who was with me, he said, "Are you sure it's broken?" I said, "Take a look," and it was like this on the end of my leg. So I hobbled over to a place where I could lie down, and then the mountain rescue team came. So we had about a 7-hour mountain rescue that took me down in darkness with headlamps and through bush with no paths down until finally they could get me to the hospital. When the advance team arrived at dusk of mountain rescue people, they were proposing, because we talked on the phone, to reset my ankle without anesthetic on the spot. So when they arrived, I had 2 questions for them. I said, "Well, let's just talk for a few minutes, before we rush into this." I said, a couple of things. First of all, how often have you done this before? One of the most important medical questions, actually a question for any profession, is how often have you done this before? Very important question. And we know that, for instance, in hospitals, in many countries, everybody gets a doctor, but poor people get doctors who are doing it for the first time. And wealthy people get doctors who've done it many times. Doctors practice on poor people so they can get better results with wealthy people. Right? The second thing is, I said, "Could you tell me what your certification is?" Right? So luckily, they did not say, "I love mountain rescue. I have a passion for mountain rescue. When I was young, I used to play with my friends. We'd have little toy plastic figures like Paw Patrol, which is a Canadian program, and we'd go out and we'd rescue people. And when I grew up, I wanted to be a mountain rescuer. And I didn't really think I needed any qualifications to do this. I thought I'd just go on a little course over the summer, and we wouldn't actually practice on any real people with their injuries. And then I'd kind of go in, but I have a passion for it, so just stick your leg out and we'll reset it for you." And in teaching, we need to ask, how often have you done this before? What's your certification? And over time, are you constantly developing, being challenged and stretched and getting better? Is your judgment improving? And by the way, they didn't fix it on the spot. I managed to talk them out of it. They just put a big splint on it to immobilize it. So are you with me so far? Yeah, if in teaching you want a return, you have to make an investment. Your investment is in individuals. It's in keeping people over time so you can challenge and stretch them so they become better. And the key thing is social capital is what you do with them when they're together. So we know that collaboration is important. We know it gets results. We know it adds value to human capital. What should that collaboration look like is the next question. And for this, I have another little test. So here we go. This is another minute, so talk to another person for another minute. Are you ready? So the question is, how do you organize your wardrobe? So it's very simple. You know, your wardrobe or your closet, how do you organize it? Would you turn to the person next to you for 1 minute and tell them how you do it? Okay, this will be a fun one, this one. So I'm just going to ask for a show of hands. I'm going to ask some question, and if your answer is yes, raise your hands. So if you organize your wardrobe by type of clothing, which means all the long sleeves are together, all the short sleeves are together, etc., etc. If you organize it by type of clothing, could you raise your hands? Wow, okay. So next, remember you are the country of IKEA. Like, you know how to organize things, okay? Second, if you organize it by color, could you raise your hands? By color. You know, like all the pink things, all the blue things, all the black things. Okay, a few. If you organize it by season, like winter things, summer things. All right, thank you. If you've just raised your hand 3 times for all those things, could you raise your hands? All right, after this session, I have a very good psychotherapy service that I can offer for you. And one more question, which is, when I said, how do you organize your wardrobe? If you went, organize your wardrobe. Never thought of that before. Could you raise your hands, please? Right, so if you fell in the first type, you're kind of very organized, very precise, very systematic. You're a theory X person, so there are 2 kinds of theories of educational leadership. And theory X people love things, structures, systems, plans, protocols, targets, data, metrics, outcomes, roles, responsibilities, anything that looks like structure or system. That you love this, okay? You get excited by a spreadsheet, okay? This is what you're kind of big problem solver. You're very kind of cognitive intellectual about it. You're a kind of theory X person. If you like relationships, you think you've got better things to do than organize your closet, okay? So you want to focus on people. You want to, like the previous speaker, you want to think about building trust, knowing people. You're the kind of principal, if you're a principal who's not in your office all the time, but you're always about on the corridors, looking for chance meetings where you can develop conversations, in people's classrooms because you want to know what's going on, phoning the parents when things are going well, so that when you have to phone them or email them when things are going badly, it's not the first communication they get from you. If those are the kinds of things that matter to you, you're a theory Y human relations person. And we think of this as two things. This is a play on words in English. The first is solidarity. So solidarity is the theory Y. It's all about the relationships. It's all about trust. It's all about spending time with people. It's all about eating together. It's all about having informal time as well as formal time, so that you can really trust the people you're with to do the job together. That's your view of how to collaborate. But you also want a second thing, which is solidity. When you're collaborating, it's important to know sometimes how to collaborate. If you're going to give critical feedback to somebody, you can't just put that out there spontaneously, because if you do, there's a huge risk people will be offended, they'll be upset, they'll feel ashamed, they'll feel defensive. If you value critical feedback as well as positive feedback, you will need structures and protocols which separate the criticism from the critic and the criticism from the person being criticized. This is the stuff, the thing, the solidity of collaboration. Protocols, structures, teams designed in particular ways. Are you with me so far? You need both. It's not either or, it's both and. Some of you will be more one thing than the other thing, but both things matter. So you've got to stretch yourself to be both things, or stretch your team to be both things, so that your team actually contains all of this if it's not in your own head. What does this look like in practice? And I have a video next, which I think 25 minutes, I just have time to show you, because so far we've outlined two reasons for collaborating. One is that it gets results. Actually, your students will do better, and your most disadvantaged students will especially do better when teachers and schools are sharing their expertise. The second reason is it builds professionalism, and it enhances motivation and retention within the teaching force. But there's a third reason, and the third reason is our goals in education are much more complex now than they used to be. And they're hard to solve from the top down, and they're hard to solve if you're on your own. Our goals look like, I could show you many, but the Ontario curriculum looks like this, for example, in Canada. 10 years ago, the Ontario curriculum looked like literacy, maths, and completing high school. Does this sound familiar? Because I happen to know you've been building collaborative teams in Sweden, because I have little spies who tell me these things. And they've been mainly focused on literacy and maths, correct? That's where the emphasis has been. And 10 years ago in Ontario, that was it. Literacy, maths, identify the achievement gaps, the inequities, find strategies together that will help you close the gaps and reduce the inequities. Now Ontario, it's much more complex. Now it's excellence means not just literacy and maths, it means the arts. It means engaging with nature, the outdoors. Very broad views of what excellence is. Equity now is not just about achievement gaps, it's about identity and inclusion. So if you're a refugee, can you see yourself in the curriculum of the school? Does it address who you are and what culture and background you bring into the school with you, and language? If you are LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, can you see that in the health curriculum of the school? Can you see that in the posters that are around the school? If you are from a different religion is that represented within the schools. So all kinds of different identities, but increasingly now we see equity of Sami people the same. If you're a Sami person, can you see yourself within the curriculum of the school? Or are you always having to adjust who you are to the way the school is, rather than the school adjusting how it is in response to you? Inclusion and identity are the new equity. We have to know who people are, and they have to be able to see themselves in terms of what we do and what the curriculum is like, especially when our students don't look like us, okay? And well-being, which is mental health, emotional development, physical development, and so on. This is now the Ontario curriculum. And you can't solve that with a top-down strategy, and you can't solve that all by yourself. You need other people to do that with you. I'm going to show you a video. But first I have a task for you. Imagine it's the summertime. You're going on a picnic. No, don't show this yet, okay? You're going on a picnic, and you're taking a bottle of wine with you. You've been waiting to drink this bottle of wine for 3 years. Been storing it up for a special moment with family and friends. And when you get there, you're miles from the nearest road. You say, okay, let's do this. Who's got the corkscrew? And people say, corkscrew? Corkscrew? Nobody brought a corkscrew. How? Without looking on Google, how do you, this is one more minute again, how do you open a bottle of wine without a corkscrew? Where you go.
Have you ever been in this position? Really nice bottle of wine, no corkscrew. How do you open it? I'll show you. First of all, take the capsule off.
Stop. No, they have to discuss this first before you show it them. Okay? All right. So, it's all right. Another 45 seconds, talk to your partner, then we'll show the video. Thank you. Hold on. So, if your answer was a bit like a corkscrew, if it was a stick or a Swiss Army knife or a nail file, or it was your finger pushing it in rather than pulling it out, if it was anything like that, could you raise your hand? So, Sweden has about an 85% failure rate on creativity, basically, all right? You all fail, almost all of you. So what is the answer? Are you ready? Are we ready? Can we show this now, please? Here you go. Do I press this?
Have you ever been in this position? Really nice bottle of wine, no corkscrew. How do you open it? I'll show you. First of all, take the capsule off. Voila. Secondly, you need a pair of shoes. Just one will do it. Bottle of wine, a shoe, and a wall. Place bottle in shoe and start banging. Cork begins to pop up. Do the rest by hand. Et voila.
Voila. Yeah. So when you go back home, what you'll be able to say to your staff is, we finally went to a professional development workshop where we learned something practical, okay? So, we know that collaboration is good for student achievement. We know it's good for teacher morale and teacher development. We now know it's better for dealing with complex problems, thinking out of the box, bringing all your minds together to how to solve an unfamiliar problem. If we want our kids to do this, our teachers have to be able to do this too. And they have to be able to do it together as well as do it by themselves, and they need the autonomy to do that. So they need freedom from the bureaucracy above, but they need more openness to each other in terms of working together. Freedom to create, develop, innovate, and so on. Are you with me so far? The answer to no autonomy is not individual autonomy. The answer is collective autonomy, which means we're more autonomous from the bureaucracy, but we're less autonomous from each other. That's the trade we have to make. What does that look like when you design it in terms of the solidarity of the relationships and the solidity of the stuff? I'm going to give you some examples which all come from this study we did last year of 5 examples of reputationally strong collaboration among teachers in different parts of the world that we were already going to, so it didn't cost any extra money. I'm sorry Norway's there and not Sweden. I apologise for that. When I go and speak in Norway, I'll pretend it's Sweden and not Norway, and then we'll even the score. And in these 5 places, we looked at 5 different models or designs. There are many ways of designing collaboration in deliberate ways. We looked at 5 examples. I'm going to show you 3. Lesson study, which originated in Japan 100 years ago, but we looked at it in Hong Kong. Teacher-led, not principal-led professional learning communities, and job-alike curriculum planning, which means teachers planning curriculum in the same subject or with the same grade level of kids. And a couple more, but I want to focus on these 3 at first. Let me tell you the results of what we found, and then I'll show you what it looks like in the examples. So here's the results. And these are all in a text, a kind of shorter version of this presentation will be up online, I believe, on the Congress website. So you should, you can take pictures if you like, but it will be up there as well. Here, if you're doing this here, then you're engaging in what we call, it's just a play on words really, professional collaboration. So this means you are collaborating. It might be good, it might be bad, it might be this way, it might be that way. We don't know. It's sort of descriptive if you're over here. If you're over here, the ways you're collaborating are both stronger in relationships and more focused in terms of the things you're doing, right? Both the X and the Y, the solidarity and the solidity. If you're over here, you're not just talking and nothing happens, or doing stuff without thinking about it, but you're talking and doing, talking and doing, talking and doing, and constantly reflecting on the relationship between them. If you're not just looking at achievement results, but you're thinking about together developing learning for students that has meaning and purpose in their lives and not just as a set of tasks in schools. When you work with others, you're not just teaching on your own all day, then you have meetings on small chairs at the end of the day, but working together becomes part of the life of the school. Whenever there's a problem, whenever there's an issue, whenever there's a difficult student, it's routine for teachers to come together and think about how to work with that student, how to solve that problem, how to develop an innovation. It's embedded in the way you think about your job. The more and more of the collaboration is not just administrator-led, it is teacher-led. So teachers begin to drive the change. Teachers begin to drive the collaboration, not only or mostly the administrators. And the dialogue, the discussion, is not just polite conversation, but it is sometimes challenging, rigorous. It looks at evidence, the evidence of research, the evidence that's in your own school before your own eyes. You will question people. People will have to challenge their assumptions about who can learn and who cannot learn, for example. So the discussion and the dialogue is more rigorous. And last, more and more of the collaboration is not just for your students, but it's with your students. Your students are part of the collaborative process. They are collaborators too. Are you with me so far? Let's look at 3 examples of this, which are quite different, but all demonstrate the same principles. First, let's go to Hong Kong. This is in the middle. This is me on the left. This is my wife on the right. She's a former school principal. And in the middle is Veronica Yao. Veronica Yao is the principal of Fanling College in Hong Kong. Fanling has quite a wide-ranging population. Some of the kids come across from mainland China. Many of them struggle with their families and with their lives. In Fanling, they have introduced into Hong Kong, one of 20 schools, introduced a version of lesson study called Open Class. Twice a year, 100 people come to the school and divide into groups of about 10 and go and observe lessons while the teachers are teaching them. They may be principals from other schools, they may be teachers from other schools, they may come from the Faculty of Education, they may be parents who are thinking about sending their children to the school. The teachers teach the classes, and in groups of about 10, observers go and look at what's going on and then give feedback afterwards to the teacher about what they've seen, some of it quite critical. This is lesson study. Originated in Japan, this is the kind of Hong Kong Fanling version. Here's all the observers in the room at the same time as the children are working. We watched English lessons, we watched science lessons, and here's various ways in which you see the children working. Here are children presenting their ideas to the class. Here they are working on things the school's invented called iBoards. iBoards are little blackboards, and they work in small groups on the blackboards. They'll jot down their ideas, and then other kids will come along and edit them. They'll rub things out, and they'll add other things. It's a technology, but it's very tactile. And people can edit and adapt. In 50 minutes, the kids will work individually, they'll work in pairs, they'll work in 4s, where they all have different roles and levels of competence. They'll give feedback on each other's presentations. Then they'll put their iBoards at the front of the class, and then they'll show their iBoards to the rest of the class, and they'll present them. The teacher will talk, the teacher will engage in question and answer, all this in 50 minutes. And then at the end of it, the people observing you will get together and they will give you feedback. And they'll ask you some very challenging questions, like, you only called on 4 students in the whole lesson. What about the others? Or, the lesson's going very fast, it goes at breakneck speed, because it's 50 minutes, all these different components. What about the students who can't keep up? What do you do? And the teacher sometimes admits the difficulty and says, yes, it's very hard to call on a wide range of students. Or sometimes they'll clarify and say, all the students can keep up because the day before, after school time, is not homework following up from the lesson they did. It's preparation for the lesson that is to come. So by the time they come into the lesson, they know what to do. It's a very different way of thinking about out-of-school time, preparing for the lesson, not following up on the lesson that they've just had. How can they do that? How come the teacher doesn't collapse in shame or humiliation under this assault of criticism that they get back? There's two reasons. One is, it's not the teacher's lesson. The teacher has planned the lesson with colleagues in her department. And then they've all taught the lesson, all of them, beforehand. And then they've all reviewed it together, and then they've all taught it again. It's not her lesson, it's their lesson. It's not a criticism of the teacher, it's a criticism of the lesson. Are you with me so far? It's a protocol to separate the critical feedback from the person being criticized. Second, when the teachers or the visitors are brought into their groups, they're structured in a particular way so that some people will focus on the positives, some people will focus on the problems. So you don't just have the people who are always complaining or always finding fault who make the criticism. It's a role that's expected of you, not a personality that you can't avoid. And then, it's not only about structures and protocols, because this runs through the whole culture in the school. You apply for a job at this school, and they don't ask you to teach a lesson. They say, how could you teach a lesson if you don't know the kids? Instead, they'll give you one of the best teachers in the school, and you will go and observe that lesson as a student teacher, and you are asked to give critical feedback to the teacher, one of the best teachers in the school, about their lesson. The expert teachers say they often learn from seeing people who are seeing things almost for the first time. They learn things about their teaching, and it demonstrates to the student teacher, this is the way we work as a culture in the school. But it's very Hong Kong. You go in a meeting, nobody's on their iPhone, because Veronica Yao will have a reckoning with you later on if you do that. Everybody pays attention. If there's food, everybody goes. It's not optional, it's compulsory, because Hong Kong is the culture of Confucius, and Confucius values hierarchy, respect, family, authority, the teacher, teamwork, learning, duty. All of these things fit the culture. So you can't just take it exactly as they do it and move it into Sweden or anywhere else. You have to think, what are a few practices that they're doing that are interesting, but what's the principle? The principle is people need feedback on their teaching. They get upset if that's done in an unstructured way. If you create a structure to do it, and a strength of relationships amongst the people in the school, you're more likely to get the result that you want. Are you with me so far? I'm not telling you all to do lesson study. I'm saying solidarity of relationships, solidity of the stuff, the protocols that help you get the feedback you need to get the results that you want together. This is Hong Kong. Now let's go to 3 minutes, 57 seconds. Let's go to the Pacific Northwest. How many of you are from rural municipalities? So in Sweden, a lot of municipalities are rural. One of the places where technology can really make a difference in collaboration is with rural municipalities. We've worked with 5 states in the Pacific Northwest where there's high rural poverty. Poverty isn't just an urban phenomenon, it's a rural phenomenon too. And in these places of rural poverty, the communities are doubly disadvantaged because sometimes the schools are so tiny, the teachers can't learn from anybody else. They're mainly on their own all the time. You're the only teacher of your year or the only teacher of your subject. and you have to teach other subjects as well as the one you're qualified for. It's overwhelming. So in the Pacific Northwest, we've helped them build a network of schools across 5 states. And 2 things characterize this network that wants to increase student engagement with their learning. The first is to find ways to help teachers connect with each other when they can't do that physically because their communities are very tiny. So they meet twice a year physically, but the rest of the time they share ideas and they plan together online using Google Hangout, using Skype, using other platforms as well. The technology supports the twice a year face-to-face. It uniquely adds value and makes possible collaboration when it can be provided in no other way. Second, when they come, what they discover is they know every time they come there's something they will do. You can define a group by its moral principles, by its relationships, but also by a practice that when you come, you know this is something you value that you will always do. And what they do is they create curriculum together. So, for example, teachers of writing develop skills of argumentative writing with their kids, the pros and cons of drones, for example. And then the kids across schools will give peer feedback on each other's work. And the kids say, because they're teenagers, it's easier to get feedback from a peer, a teenager you don't know, than it is from a teenager you do know, who you have to live with day after day after day after they've given you that feedback. The teachers know what to do. There's a practice that they value, and that's something they decide for themselves that we didn't give them. And they collaborate with their students and not just for their students. Solidarity, solidity, more robust planning, more robust dialogue, clearer structures, strong relationships. Last one. Do we have time for one more? We do. Not this one. I wasn't going to show you that one anyway, but this one. Up in the north of Ontario, there's a school district with 23 schools in an area the size of France. Half of the kids are indigenous. They're Sami, basically. The group with the greatest inequity of all Canadians is indigenous students. That's where, I don't know if it's true of Sami people in Sweden, is it? Yeah, huge inequities. And we know where this comes from. We know the history of oppression in all the countries of which we are otherwise proud. Forcibly separated students from their families in Canada through to the 1990s, forbade them to speak their language, isolated them from their families, and because the Canadians wanted to create mining communities and military communities, forcibly moved many Indigenous families out of their communities to utterly inhospitable places. And when they would not move, they sent police in the dead of night to the north to shoot the dogs on which they depended for their living. It's known as the dog slaughter. And this was the moment some families remember when their parents or grandparents gave up their last straw of hope and turned to alcohol, to drug dependency, to suicide. And the legacy of that across the generations for children now is appalling in terms of poverty, dysfunctional families, all the kind of shame that you see in communities that have been abused historically. And so the superintendent of this district, here we are flying up to do our field work, is a man called Sean Monteith. He's on the left here. When Sean Monteith became an administrator at first, he developed the simple literacy, math, high school graduation, because teachers believed these kids could not learn They could not talk, let alone write. They could barely grunt, teachers said. And so they felt their job was to care for them, not really to teach them. And this superintendent wanted to change this, to raise expectations for teaching. And so he gathered teachers together, because there's always some teachers a bit further ahead than other teachers, to look at examples of student work. And then teachers started to see some teachers were getting a bit more out of their kids than they were. And those teachers started to cry because they felt they'd let their kids down for 10, 15, 20 years, believing they could not learn when actually they could. And this was a bit tough at first, and it was very top-down. But about 5 years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago, they moved on to the next stage. And the next stage under Ontario's policy was not how do you fit the kids to the school, but how do you fit the school to the kids. And so Sean introduced art, Indigenous art, into the schools. Elders coming and talking about narrative, stories, drummers. They fit the school curriculum into the schedule of the northern life and living in the outdoors and hunting and fishing and building wilderness camps. And then they discovered that some of the kids who weren't learning in class were very good on the hockey rink and very good in the locker room as leaders when they were preparing for the hockey rink. So a group of hockey coaches got together, led some professional learning communities with classroom teachers to develop cross-curricular skills that would transfer from hockey into the rest of their learning environment. And see this behind me here? Some of the kids have fetal alcohol syndrome, which means their mothers were alcoholic when the kids were in the womb. This means they can't sit still. They find it very hard to concentrate. They started climbing kitchen cabinets when they went into the home economics family studies room. And so because they had teams where teachers worked with occupational therapists, the occupational therapist said, so the kids need to climb. Instead of stopping them climbing, let them climb. So they put a climbing wall in the classroom. And when they need to climb, they climb. And then they come down again, and then they're ready to learn. And when they need to climb, or spin, or roll, or whatever else they need to do, they do that. And then they're ready to learn again. Because now the curriculum fits the kid, and they have a whole range of people thinking about how to do that. And Sean, the superintendent, 4 years ago, did not tell anybody that his own mother is Indigenous. He was ashamed of the fact that his mother was Indigenous. Now he's proud that his mother was Indigenous. He boasts about his mother being Indigenous because he's in a community where working together, teachers, occupational therapists, Aboriginal support workers are now fitting the curriculum to the kids and the culture instead of trying to fit the kids into the system that already exists. What I've tried to do, if you remember this, we'll go way back here, is explain to you that we need, with collaboration at this particular time, we need it to increase achievement, to resolve the problem of equity, to create more inclusion. This is your past going back before your eyes. To get better teacher retention, and to solve the complex problems that are before us of identity and culture, as well as technology and rapid change. We need solidarity and we need solidity. And what does this mean for Sweden now? 3 things, possibly. I'm very jet-lagged, so I may only remember 2. Okay, first, you've had set up groups that have been driven a bit from the top, focused on maths and literacy, of teacher teams. Now is the time, probably, to move those to create more freedom for teachers to drive their own teams, to develop their own innovations, and find structures and systems that will help support them in doing that. Second, you have a lot of municipalities. You will get more equity when the municipalities work together as well as the teachers working together. And when they take shared responsibility for each other's achievement and equity and results. And there are structures to do that, and I'm doing that I'm advising the government of Scotland now, which has got 32 districts now in 6 clusters, where the clusters of 5 work together. And in each cluster of 5, one of the district takes leadership in one area, which might be maths or technology or well-being or something else. There's an expectation, there's a culture, and there's a structure. The districts have to work together too. And exactly as I predicted, because I am very jet-lagged, I have no idea what the third thing is. And so you can now go away and think, what was that third thing he was going to tell us about then? You'll never know. But the point is it's the big way forward now. If you provide time, it's important, but it's not enough. You need expectation, you need clarity, you need relationships. You need to organize your closet, and sometimes you need to let it go. You need to do both of those things. Enjoy the rest of your conference. Thanks for the time that you've given me to share this with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amazing. Very, very inspiring. No, stay here with me, please. Stay here with me. A couple of things that stuck with me is you spoke about preparation and homework and the difference and what should we choose. Very interesting to think about what I do, in my everyday life. Can I change something? Can I do something differently? And also, when I saw the video about the corkscrew and the bottle, what in my profession or my everyday life or in my work is the shoe, the bottle, or the cork. So what tools do I use and how do I use them in a different way to get the same or another result? Very inspiring to listen to you. Eric is now going to come up and ask you a couple of questions. So you can sit down if you like on our English confetti.
Yeah, which one am I supposed to sit on?
You feel free, you can just, feel the vibe and...
Sure.
You need to tell them.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi, Eric. How are you?
I'm very fine, thank you. I believe one of those, the white one here, can stand our way. I've been told to not sit on the other ones, but these two are fine.
Is this the joke one then?
No, it's not.
Does this make a funny noise when I sit on it? No.
No, I hope not.
Okay, good.
Well, I found a question from the audience where the one asking the question believes that open class requires collaboration between subjects, or it's better to use it in one subject. Though in Sweden we have a collaboration between subjects, and if you believe, and she or he thinks that it makes it harder to use the open classroom kind of way to work. Do you agree with this, or do you have any comments on the way Sweden organizes its schools and collaboration?
So, what I'm hearing behind this possibly is that if you engage in interdisciplinary innovation, it is very challenging. And when you're doing something challenging, you don't want somebody walking in on the first day you're doing it, watching what you're doing, and then telling you how dreadful it is. So, teaching is very public, I think, and having other people watch what we do often makes us a bit nervous and a bit anxious. And so really there are, again, a couple of ways to think about this. One is, in terms of the stuff, the protocols are very important, so that when people come in and look at your classroom, it's not open season for them to say anything they like. At Fanling, what they advise the people giving feedback is be very sensitive to the teacher's situation, always be respectful in terms of how you present your feedback, even and especially when it's critical. So some of it is in the protocol and the structures, but also some of it is they've been doing this for 9 years. And so sometimes you'll collaborate one way before you collaborate another way. Sometimes you'll collaborate badly before you collaborate well. As a leader, I often tell the people I'm working with, you know, sometimes we have to have a bad meeting before we have a good one. And the bad meeting is not an interruption to the good one. It's a necessary phase you have to go through in order to achieve that later on. So when you're building collaboration, if you're starting almost from the beginning, don't start with the most threatening things, but start with some less threatening things, perhaps like planning, rather than having somebody come in and observe what you're doing with your kids.
Well, thank you so much. I think that was that for us right now. And for our guest, we have a little gift, which is some British tea. And for our other guests, it's a nice treat to have with them home. But I think you'll like it as well.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely.